All right, here we go. I'm letting everybody in.
Okay, great.
Brace yourselves for the influx. We have quite a few.
Yes. Was the training good?
Yes.
Oh, look, Jason Butcher's here.
Oh, wow.
Haven't talked to him in forever.
Oh,
Hey, how are you all? Is that the Jim DeNova and Donna that I'm here?
Yeah, I'm hiding behind my initials right now. Good to hear your voice, buddy.
It's good to hear you. I was just talking about you a couple of weeks ago. I hope you're well.
I didn't do it, whatever it was that was being discussed.
It was nothing but praise, nothing but praise.
Okay.
Hey, good morning to you, Donna.
good morning, Jason. So great to see you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
We have about one more minute. I want to welcome everybody. And before we get started, I just want to remind you that this meeting's being recorded. And I think there's like a little message up there that the recording has started already. So we hope we're great with that, and we can really use this recording for other applicants that are interested. So I'll just give it one more minute because I see more coming in, and we'll kick it off.
I think I can just say that we all appreciate this, kind of technical assistance before we even, start to apply for these grants. I appreciate that.
Good to hear.
That's wonderful. Okay, we'll get started. We'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the Sparking Early Literacy Growth Technical Assistance Session. I'm Director of the Virginia Public Education Collaborative. And just a little bit about us, and we'll say more later. We're a statewide, nonpartisan collaborative of very diverse state and national leaders, member partners committed to championing public education at all levels. And our core mission is to seamlessly connect K-12 with higher education. When we looked at the attendance today, the people that registered, we were excited because there's such a good mix, including public and private schools, districts, early care, child care centers, libraries, after school, summer learning programs, nonprofit organizations, colleges, and universities. And that really encourages all of us that are on the team today, because that's exactly what we had in mind for this opportunity when we put out the RFP and the resource guide. The purpose of this grant opportunity, and say more about this later by Jim DeNova, is to solicit innovative ideas, initiatives, and interventions to support early literacy growth of West Virginia children birth to age 8 in high need schools and organizations. And I really would be remiss if I didn't thank the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation for providing this amazing opportunity and serving as a key partner in this work with PEC. And also a special thank you to the West Virginia Department of Education for their support and partnership and expertise in this process. This technical assistance session will be delivered in an interactive workshop format. Our idea is to give you some information about the focus and priorities of the grants, how it aligns with what the Department of Ed's early learning and early literacy initiatives, give an overview of our RFP and resource guide, and talk about support. But then we certainly want it to be interactive with you throughout. You're welcome to submit questions. And I'm going to go ahead at this time to introduce our wonderful PEC program coordinator and our graduate assistant, Maggie McDonald and V. Konopka. Maggie, could you give us an overview of some of the technical logistics?
Yes, okay. Hello, everybody. I hope that the system has been really easy to work with for you so far and that you're familiar with Teams. But today we're going to be trying to take as many of your questions as possible. So if you want to ask a question, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. There's like a little toolbar at the bottom of your screen you should see. And if you click the little icon that says show conversation, it's shaped like a little chat bubble, then you can go ahead and put your questions there. Or you can click the little raise hand icon that's right next to it, and you can raise your hand and we will call on you like we're in a classroom. So whichever you prefer, we'd like to take as many questions as possible. And also, if you are not speaking, please do try to keep your microphone muted and keep your video off just so we can see who's speaking really clearly and we're not Hollywood squares the whole time trying to squint and see who's talking. All right, Donna, is there anything else I've missed, or I think we're good to go?
I just wondered if you would add how this would be available, these questions and answers and in the chat after.
Yeah. After our session, we're going to be actually, if you've noticed, we're recording this session, we're going to be posting this recording on YouTube, and we'll send you all a link to it as soon as it's up. So if you have any colleagues who weren't able to attend this session today for any reason, they'll just be able to watch this on demand on YouTube anytime that they would like. And we'll also be sharing answers to any questions I think would be pertinent for a lot of you who have joined. So if you have any questions throughout this whole process, please do ask them. We're here to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Maggie. And V, we're looking forward to you helping us in the chat room with the question. Welcome you too. Okay, we'll get started. And the first item on the agenda is to go over the focus and priorities of this grant opportunity. And Dr. Jim DeNova is going to lead us through that. But I just want, I can't say enough about Jim DeNova, and I have a tendency to ramble on because I feel so strongly about him. And you might have heard people complimenting even starting this session. He's pretty much known throughout the state as the go-to for education. He is the vice president of the Claude Benedum Foundation, and his primary responsibility is the education agenda, not only in West Virginia, but Southwestern PA. And in addition, I know a lot of people don't realize this, he directs several economic development projects in West Virginia and Southwest PA. He holds a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh with a concentration in social research, which is really interesting. And for 35 years, he's been working in the nonprofit world and philanthropy. He's on the board of numerous organizations. He's sought after to be on boards, and we're really excited that he's on the West Virginia Public Education Board as the co-chair. So obviously, I think a lot of him, but there's reasons why. And he is just, I call him the best critical we have. He'll do anything he can to help. He's provided so many opportunities to both the PEC and myself and Jim, and we thank you in advance and would love to hear from you. You're muted.
Thank you, Donna, for the, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Thank you for those kind words. Please be on standby for my funeral because that would be a lot of help. But let me just say this about this early literacy initiative, because we were struggling at the Benedum Foundation to figure out how we can add to or make an impact on the literacy, early literacy levels in West Virginia. Because on one hand, there's a remarkable amount of good work being done around reading in the early grades and in the early years, pre-K through elementary school. Campaign for grade level reading, the Harla Center and Imagination Library, Read Aloud, dozens of after-school programs and community-based early literacy initiatives. But at the same time, the state's proficiency level, according to NAEP, the nation's report card, is that only 30% of fourth graders in West Virginia are reading at a proficient level or above. And it really brought us to the conclusion, or to the interest in looking at where there are gaps, where there are disparities. Because oftentimes averages mask disparity. And we have found through the investigation that Peck and the Department of Ed, and you'll hear more about this from Maggie Luma, we have schools in very poor, very isolated parts of the state of West Virginia where the students are reading at an 85% proficiency level. By the same token, there are schools, same demographic mix, same region, where students are reading at 20%. So there are wide gaps. And what it says to us is some things are working remarkably well, and in other areas there are greater needs for some very targeted interventions. So we designed this RFP around the notion that there are gaps, there are targeted populations, there are certain disparities even by grade level. And Maggie will comment on this later. Outside of geography, there's also this revealing finding from a longitudinal study that the department is doing that found that the pre-K program has been incredibly successful in accelerating the reading levels of 4-year-olds in the state of West Virginia. And I really have to applaud the state of West Virginia for universal pre-K. I think it's a remarkable innovation. But part of the study that the department is doing is finding that those students who are excelling in the pre-K program, in the 4-year-old program, have lost virtually all of those gains by the first grade. So there's a dissipation factor. So there's another area of disparity between grade levels. So what we wanted to do through a process of an RFP is to solicit ideas, as Donna said, innovative ideas, but those kind of ideas that are sort of laser focused on those specific areas of disparity. Where are those pockets of greatest need, and how can we target new approaches that hopefully will result in something that we can present to policymakers and be scaled? That's our ultimate goal. So in order to understand where there are those discrete disparities, either by geography or student population or by grade level across the state of West Virginia, PEC, Public Education Collaborative, put together a resource guide, which I hope you all reference. It's a remarkable document. It's over 50 pages. I consider it an enduring learning tool because it contains very discrete maps. It shows poverty, proficiency, and literacy. It shows best practices from within West Virginia and from other communities. Evaluation tools for how to track what you're doing at particular grade levels. And by the way, because we look at third grade reading, it is a key milestone in terms of any student's progress. We are not looking at this as a third grade initiative. I want to be really clear about that. We are looking at this from birth through third grade. So there are markers along that journey that are really predictive of a student's ability to know how to read by the third grade. And as the adage goes, so that they can read to learn from that point forward. And I'd also like to point out that the RFP, which is really accompanied by this resource guide, was really developed with, at first blush, through an ad hoc committee of frontline teachers, early childhood providers, Head Start instructors, because we wanted to hear what should go into this RFP, and we wanted to hear from frontline workers. This is not an academic exercise. This is really a way of tapping what a lot of in the field people know, what they observe, and what can be done differently or could be added to what is already being done to target those really high risk, high need students. So we've come up with this sort of formula that we're going to request proposals and Benedum. The cap on these projects would be $50,000. That number came from the teachers and the early childhood providers. It also is to be matched. And it can be matched by the in-kind resources of schools and nonprofit organizations that can use their own money. It can also be matched by other outside funders. And I have to give a shout out to the Steely Foundation in the Eastern Panhandle. For any of those who are on the call from the Eastern Panhandle, this was unsolicited by us, but the Steely Foundation stepped up and said any proposal from Jefferson, Morgan, Berkeley counties will be matched by the Steely Foundation. It's an automatic match for any of those who are applying for the Benedum Foundation grant. I thought that was incredibly generous, and it's an incredible incentive because the guarantee was made prior to seeing what the proposal is. But basically, they are saying, Steely Foundation is saying, if the project can pass muster through the review committee at PEC that's going to select the awardees, they have confidence in that project, and if it's from their service area, they want to be a part and match it. So a great shout out to that foundation. And so I would also encourage others who are contemplating a proposal that would be submitted for the Benedum grant. Think about the foundations in your own community. Who else might be willing to do something similar to the Steely Foundation? But ultimately, the issue of the matching funds isn't so much to compel you to go out and raise money. It's to demonstrate an investment in the project, that there's a commitment to the project. And that's why being able to redeploy existing resources as a match is perfectly acceptable to us, the Benedum Foundation, because it shows a commitment of the institution. So I would like to, I will close because I want to get as close to the Q&A session as possible. And Maggie Luma and Allison Dagin from WVU will go through the particulars and the timeline of how this is going to roll out. But I want to emphasize one other thing. PEC has put together 2 workshops. We had one a few weeks ago, and today is the second one. They're also providing individual technical assistance, individual consultation to anybody that has a good idea that needs to be finessed into a fundable project. And I say that that's important because we're interested in ideas. And if you have a great idea, I'd rather deploy the resources of PEC to say, how can we help shape this into a better project, a good idea to a good project design, than to ignore or not entertain the good idea. So that's why between now and January, there are experts available to help you shape your project, to shape your ideas into a proposal. So this isn't competitive in the sense that we want to set up a bureaucratic barrier to approval. This is competitive in the sense that we want the best ideas that target the highest needs of those students who are left behind. So I will stop now, but I'm hoping as we go through the details of the proposal process that we'll have time for questions later on. Okay?
Thank you so much, Jim. And
Thank you.
your point was really well taken about the technical assistance, because I know all of us have applied for federal grants, state grants in the past, and it's like, as an applicant, lots of times you feel like you're trying to read the mind of people you don't really know. And so the fact that everybody's so willing to be open and answer questions and go one-to-one, or even have another technical assistance session, you know, I hope makes people feel comfortable. Okay, right now I'd like to introduce, it's our pleasure to have Maggie Luma with us from the West Virginia Department of Education. She's the state lead, as many of you know, for the West Virginia campaign for grade level reading, and she's a literacy coordinator at the department too. And she's been very instrumental in helping us write the RFP and particularly the resource guide. So we thank her for that. And I was reading a little bit about Maggie. Everything you read about her says she's a self-proclaimed lifelong learner. And I think that is just speaks volumes about her. And one of the things that she does that I think has kind of made her social media star, it's gone viral, she has been creating podcasts, and all of us have listened to them, for educators in West Virginia and beyond educators, the Leaders of Literacy podcast. And I'm going to ask Maggie McDonald if she would not mind posting that link to that in the chat room, because those are wonderful learning experiences for all of us. And another thing that we were just talking about with Maggie, she's a new mother. And it's very exciting. So Maggie, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Donna. That was a much more warm welcome than I could have ever expected. So thank you for having me. Like Donna said, I lead the state campaign for grade level reading, and I notice a lot of familiar names. So I know that most of you have been, hopefully you feel like you've been touched by the campaign for grade level reading in some capacity since its inception in 2014. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading was born out of West Virginia Board of Education Policy 2512, the Transformative System of Support for Early Literacy, and that went into effect November of 2014. So it is our comprehensive systemic approach to closing the literacy achievement gap by the third grade. We believe in addressing the whole child, and we believe that schools can't do it alone. We know that we share this goal with the Sparking Literacy Grant of getting our children reading proficiently by that magic third grade year, but it's too much to burden on just the school system. And so what we've done at the West Virginia Department of Education is we've secured funding from the governor, that the majority of which goes directly to the districts. And the remaining is used to employ some literacy specialists. We've done the West Virginia Early Learning Longitudinal Study conducted by the National Institute for Early Education Research, NEAR, that Jim mentioned earlier. And then we do local level professional learning. And we just really hope that through this system of support, we can provide meaningful professional learning and the support in 4 focus areas through the campaign, which are school readiness, attendance, extended learning, so what happens before and after school, and of course, high quality instruction. Jim spoke a lot about our school readiness initiative. We are so proud of our West Virginia Universal Pre-K here in the WVDE. We have a framework called Ready, Set, Go West Virginia, where we really try to connect families and the school systems. We try to ease the transition from home to the school setting or the child care setting. And we believe, yes, in the whole child, that we need to address social, emotional, mental health, physical health, as well as those academic skills. But also we believe that we need to be ready for the child, not the other way around. So Ready, Set, Go West Virginia is a way of making the communities aware of how they can meet the needs of the children, no matter where they are, when they come to us. We also have some really strong partnerships through extended learning. So because we know, again, schools can't do it alone, we had to figure out where are the children going before school and after school. Because with those partnerships, we can really strengthen our efforts in getting our children reading, right? So Jim mentioned this earlier too, that we partnered with, Read Aloud West Virginia, with the statewide after school network, with, smaller after school providers to do trainings in literacy rich environments, to talk about, just how to read with children. And we're really excited to see those partnerships continue and strengthen with this grant from the Benedum Foundation. And then, of course, high quality instruction is a huge priority for this grant, and it is our primary priority out of the West Virginia Department of Education. However, we know that we can't really address the academic needs if we're not addressing social, emotional, mental, and physical health. So really, we think about the whole child. And I always make a point to say this. I heard this quote at a conference a few years back, that education with intention matters deeply to the world we want to see. And I believe strongly that we have some of the best teachers in West Virginia, some of the best child care providers, because they care deeply about children. And that's why you're all here, because you care and you want to strengthen your program. And through the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, we've had some innovations and some creative ways to, create this world we want to see. The goals that the West Virginia PEC and the WVDE share, to give access to high quality education to all children. But if we don't bring really careful intention to those programs and those efforts, we might find ourselves doing what we've always been doing, right? Bringing intention means doing the research, doing the data analysis, finding where those gaps are, and really being intentional about targeting those gaps, and maybe even stepping outside of our comfort zone. Because if we keep doing what we've always been doing, we're gonna keep getting the same results, right? So I'm just personally thrilled to be a partner with this grant, because I know that with $50,000 and perhaps your matching funding, you can stretch and strengthen some of the things that perhaps you've wanted to do through the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and maybe just take it to the next level, bump it up a notch. And finally, I really just want to leave you with this consideration, that since the inception of the campaign, myself, our 5 early literacy specialists, we have tried to encourage communities to implement initiatives that reach our most at-risk learners. We've shared a video, the statistics lottery, that shows the huge gap in just zip codes, right? And then, we talk about some of our other subgroups, other subpopulations that really need to be targeted. And so we've always said that the funding for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is flexible. It can target certain groups. And I think that this Sparking Literacy grant is just the perfect opportunity to really braid those funds, or to reach those most at-risk populations, and make just a bigger difference for those students who need it the most. And unless you wanted me to address anything else, Donna, I think I could probably go on and on about the campaign and the work we do. But I know I had 5 to 7 minutes. So I hope I didn't go over that.
Great. It was really wonderful. And I think you make so many good points, that there's so much good work going on, but we can step it up a little bit, or step a different way, and really enrich what we're doing and change the outcome of literacy in West Virginia. So thank you so much. And I did see that Maggie put your link to the podcast right in the chat room, so people will enjoy.
I'm so excited. And that podcast is formatted to hit the 4 focus areas of the campaign. You might get some ideas from experts about the focus and priority areas for this grant. And I cannot take full credit for it. I really appreciate the kind words. This was my idea, and then my team of literacy specialists really took it and ran with it. So thank you for listening and sharing it, Donna.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Allison Dagin, and she's going to go through the RFP with you and the resource guide. She's a professor in the College of Education and Human Services at WVU, and she's just done so much for the reading specialist program at WVU. Her research is very important to her and us, and it includes quality professional learning experiences for K-12 teachers, early literacy research, and reading specialist preparation. And I could turn my camera around so you could see it on my bookshelf, but she's the lead writer of the International Literacy Association standards for the preparation of literacy professionals and co-editor of the best practices of literacy leaders, Key to Schools Improvement, 2nd edition. So she's an accomplished author, and we've really been thrilled to have her as a huge part of this grant. I give her almost all the credit for creating the RFP. You know, she had a great team with her graduate assistant, Chrissy Glantz, and our graduate assistant, V, that I've already introduced, and Maggie McDonald was key for this too. But Allison was really leading it, and I feel almost like she's part of the West Virginia Public Education Collaborative too. And you'll get to know Allison is a really engaging, approachable person that will help you with anything. She has so many outside interests outside of her daily work. And one that I've worked with her in is the Women Leadership Institute at WVU. And that's been something that she's taken to a new level. So I'll turn it over to you now, Allison, to go over our RFP and resource guide. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thank you for those very kind words. Likewise is what I'm thinking right back at you. So thank you so much for the time here. I'm going to take my time, and as Jim said, really want to get to the questions because that's where the meat of the conversation will come up. But I just think that, you know, as I listen to the speakers before me talking about this grant, if you are like me, I'm like on the edge of my seat with my idea. Right? Because I think what happens is anyone who works with anyone from kids, learners from birth to 8 to 10 to 10th grade in this state, you can't leave the daily job without recognizing a deficit in a group of these learners, young learners, older learners. And I think that it's impossible that you would leave the job on a daily basis, not get back in your car and think, what can I do to help? How can I fix this? How can I identify this problem? And then what does it take to solve this problem? And really, this problem is this sadly abysmal low literacy rates. And you look around, and it's a tough one to deal with because you work with professionals that are working, to the best of their ability. I'm working to the best of my ability every day. We're working really hard. We're trying so hard, and yet with all these great efforts in the state, we're still struggling. So out of that, I can't imagine doesn't grow an idea. What's the idea? How can we help these learners? And I think that's what this grant is about. So if you're sitting there with your idea right now, right in the front of your mind or written down on your notes, you're probably one of everyone on this call. And the purpose of these documents that we have created, the request for proposal and the resource guide, is very simply a support to help. You know, as Donna had mentioned at the beginning of the call, you know, there's some agencies, and sadly, I'm sorry, some of the federal government agencies, Federal Department of Ed agencies, when they put out these requests for proposals, you read them, you look at them, and I've thought before, do these folks really want to fund me here? Because the documents are written in such a lofty technical way, and the requirements are so stiff and strict. You think that, you know, if I don't put this staple in the right corner, then I'm not going to get the grant, like these type of things. Well, all of what we have for you is none of that, right? These documents are to support you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over just 2 pieces of each one of those with details. I'm going to share my screen here. I'll put on my glasses because now I need those. And I'm just going to address the RFP. Okay, so very simply, the RFP is your framework. This is where all of the musts come in. This is what the project must have. This is what you really want to look into. So rather than going through the whole 20-page document, I'm just drawing your attention to page 12. Because on page 12, there's a summary of required and recommended components in these projects. So as I'm describing these and giving some of the details, I'm hoping that you have your idea, again, either on paper or in your mind, and thinking how your idea matches up with what this grant is looking for. Again, at the end of the day, what we know is that even as early as 3rd grade, our learners are not reading and writing at the levels that they are supposed to. So this grant is intending to back it up from birth to 8 and say, what do we know and what do we need to do within those years to help meet this need? Now, that being said, there's still a need after 8. I want to be very clear about that. So here's what this grant you must do with this grant. You must take your great idea and transform it here. So as Maggie Luma said, one of the highlights of this grant is in the state like West Virginia that has initiatives that are already going on in literacy, is that we in this grant have followed those categories. So when you hear school readiness, instructional practices, or extended learning, these are already areas that the state is supporting teachers and groups with. So this grant must align with at least one of these 3. Might it be 2? It might, but when you go to fill out the application, you'll see one of the first questions says, identify, is this a school readiness project? Is this an instruction project or extended learning? The grant must target high-risk population of learners. Now, I'm just going to say this. This is not only SES data here. There are other factors that go into the high-risk populations, which we outline in this RFP. And so when we think about communities that are plagued with opioid addiction, when we look at communities that might have, might be in library deserts, when we think about communities that don't have access to good prenatal care. So high risk can be defined in multiple ways. This grant must prioritize learners ages birth to 8. Now, this is not to say it is a span of birth to 8, because that project would be, you might have multiple ages in this project, but it is also okay to choose one band of that birth to 8 area. And so some of the other items are must. This project must take place in the state of West Virginia. Well, that's a given. So I kind of chuckle when I even say that, but this is for West Virginia children. The grant must detail outcomes. Now, when we think about measurable outcomes, thinking about your project that you have in your mind already, at the end of the funding year, because this is a funding year, even though projects may go on beyond that, what are the outcomes? What do we expect to see? Now, in the resource guide, we talk a lot about assessment, but I'm just going to say right now, because we'll come back to this, one of those outcomes must be measured around student growth and literacy, period. The other outcomes could be measured in things that we commonly refer to as like the happiness factor, like were participants satisfied? That's great. That's a great measure, right? This is when we're doing projects, we want to know about satisfaction. If this is an after school project, did kids show up? What was their attendance rate? That's a good measure. But ultimately, and ultimately, what we need is a measure for student growth. And here's the great thing. You choose what that measure is. That's it. Okay, so you choose what that measure is. You choose what element of literacy? That's my phone. I can't find it. It should be here. One of my children must have picked it up at some point. I'm ready to pull the plug on it. Okay, but that didn't even work. So when we think about measuring student growth, oh my goodness, how do you rebound from that? When you think about measuring student growth, what you want to really think about is elements, right? But I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So the other must, you must complete a one-page intent to apply by January 15th. So by January 15th, there's a form that is linked off the PEC website, and you just very simply are saying, yes, I intend to submit on February 28th. So we need to have that, and you also need to have some type of organizational acknowledgement, whether it's a superintendent, a library, whoever your partner is, somebody saying, I am aware of this grant proposal, I support this grant proposal, and we put it in. So I'm just scrolling up, strongly recommended, and Jim, Donna, and Maggie have all really alluded to some of these strongly recommendeds here. Collaborative partnerships. You know what we think we would love for you to do is, whether you're within the county or outside of the county, you know, it is to collaborate with others. There might be a school in your county or an after-school project that's doing something really unique that you want to partner with them. So find folks that are doing innovative projects, and they can be partners. You could partner with libraries. You could partner with early child centers, community organizations. I'm going to read this right off the RFP of who is able to apply for this grant. And it's really important because there's a whole group, and that is public and private schools, early child care and childhood programs, after school and summer learning programs, nonprofit organizations, colleges, university, and other literacy-focused stakeholders, communities, public organizations. So here's the thing, it's all of us. So if you're one of those, and you probably are because you are on this call, find somebody else within that category to partner with. This is a recommendation. Partnerships are not a requirement, but when we think about really good work, partnering is a positive strategy. Professional learning and planning for teachers or providers. This is recommended. And I think part of this comes into what we know is, for example, programs don't teach children, teachers teach children, right? If you are partnering with if you are an after-school program, an extended learning program, and you are using what we would call like a paraprofessional or community members, those community members should understand components of early literacy or early reading. So the professional learning would be on their piece. We've spoken about matching funds, and again, matching funds, I just want to be very clear, and Jim could elaborate on this a little bit more. This is not, one, it's not a requirement, it's a recommendation, and two, it's not a one-to-one match. So whereas the foundation is going to support in those 3 counties a one-to-one match, that's great. Your matching funds you don't need to go search out $50,000 of matching funds for cost share. Again, some of these things, and the last thing I'm just going to say about this piece, and Jim had mentioned this, and Maggie as well, this notion of one-on-one consulting. So you are here, you're at the Zoom meeting, this is great, you're going to get some general information, but then when you have your project and you think, you know, to me, I would like to bounce this idea off somebody, that's where you put in that request to the WVPEC website, because it's a perk. It's a perk of participation. And as I had said, some of these other agencies, you have to wonder if they actually want you to receive the funding. Having something like one-on-one consulting is rare, is very rare with RFPs, but it's a great resource. Now, I should also be very clear in saying that participating in one-on-one consulting is not a guarantee for funding. So with that being said, I'm just going to stop for a moment, take a breath, and think about the resource guide. So as Jim had said, this resource guide, one, is great for this grant. But what you might want to consider is taking this resource guide and saving it down someplace, because I want to say this, almost anything you could wonder about early literacy is in this resource guide. The items that I just want to very quickly point out are, you know, the guide starts with a why early literacy is important. And for those of you who are on the call, reading this section is just going to confirm what you already know, why literacy is important. The second section talks about West Virginia achievement. And I'm going to say this, if you're having a bad day, save that section until you're having a good day, because, you know, again, we're working so hard and those scores, they just don't look good. The next section of the resource guide talks about current initiatives in the state, and this is really exciting. And again, much of what we're doing statewide is with the Department of Ed. Their great efforts are there. The next section of the resource guide ties back to the what. The what are you doing? If you decide to do a school readiness project or an extended learning project or an innovative instruction a project, there are resources specifically around those three areas. So I'm just going to scroll and say grant focus. If you're looking, I'm going to go to instruction because that's my that's my little wheelhouse. So if you're thinking about instruction, you have a section called national recommendations. Now there were so many for instruction and early literacy that we had created a chart around them, right? But there's a link, and these are all hot links in the document too, I should mention this, to the National Reading Panel Report, the National Early Reading Panel Report, the Collaborative Classroom Science of Reading piece, information from the International Literacy Association, the AFT's Reading is Rocket Science. So there are all these links that should you want, and again, we know that this folks in the state are doing great work. This is like confirmation, but confirmation of what should be in an instructional program. Okay, so we've got these resources. Under, again, if you're doing instruction, you go to the instruction section. There's promising practices. And again, anything that is underlined is a hot link. And we've got digital resources and the regional laboratories, projects that work. So if you scroll down, there's links to all these great projects. So you might want to take that great idea that you have in the front of your mind and add to it or cultivate it through these resources. The next section, again, for this, in this instance under instruction, is the initiatives in West Virginia. And so we've got a couple of those listed. By the way, this is not a completely comprehensive list because there's other initiatives that are going on, great initiatives in the state that might not be listed here. And again, so the same thing goes with extended learning. So if you know your big category, this is the way you could use this resource guide. The last thing I just want to land on for 2 minutes is, I'm sorry, for those of you who get vertigo on the scrolling, I know I do. So is the assessment piece, okay? Because again, as I said, there are 2 outcomes in this grant, and one of those has to be around student learning. And so when we think about what is that, how do I do that? We are not saying you're going to assess reading per se or writing per se, but the elements of those areas are important. So this section of the resource guide has a great resource from the ILA called Literacy Assessment, What Everyone Needs to Know. If you are working with learners and you have not read this document, it's definitely worth a skim read. Why are we doing these assessments? So we've got some resources there that are national resources. Then we've got a listing of the common assessments used in West Virginia. Now, this is what's important. You, as part of this grant, can use, if you are in a classroom or you are in school readiness and there's an assessment that you are using, that can be part of the assessment for this project. You do not have to recreate the wheel in that way. Many of these items, many of these assessments, though, are summative, and so you may be able to use these. You may want a more formative assessment, and then we have some lists. Some of these you may be familiar with. Clay's observational study. What if you're working in a school readiness program and you just want to understand somebody's knowledge of concept, a learner's concepts of print, right? It could be using that subset of the clay study. You know, can the student identify the front of the book? Do they know that reading goes left to right, right? So it does not have to be the full-blown assessment. We don't want people to learn assessments for assessment purposes, but the assessments here are really good assessments. What if you're doing an extended learning and you know what? You've never actually used an assessment for reading. And again, as I'm saying, attendance at these after-school events. Did they enjoy it? Did their behavior improve? These are great measures. But if you're not using a measure to measure their growth and literacy, you will need to find one for this grant. The informal reading inventories are probably the easiest ones to do in a setting like that. So we give you some information on informal reading assessments. And again, this is why that one-on-one is very helpful to walk through some of these items. Again, quick phonics screeners. There's some, and we also list formal literacy assessments that your school's reading specialist might be the only person who knows how to administer. But I guarantee you this: if you are an educator and you are working day to day with kids, you can learn how to administer these assessments. So it might be that you are working with, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and you want to do the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test because your initiative is around vocabulary. So, you can collect data from the parents. But when we think about measuring student growth, you need to have an assessment measure. And so we provide, again, not all these. This is not all the assessments that exist. These are just some of the more popular ones. So I think that that's a real important part because, again, at the end of the day, this grant is designed to address a deficit in literacy, reading and writing, in birth to 8-year-olds. And so the design of the project is one piece of it, and that's great. But the outcome, what we're really looking for, are projects that improve students' literacy ability as measured in a pre-post design on an area of your choosing, your identification. So that is the resource guide, and there are tons and tons and tons of resources at the end of the appendix. Again, everything is in a hot link. There's a glossary, there's maps, there's additional resources that defied the categorization of the previous document. So if nothing else, you do absolutely want to download this and save. So I'm going to stop there, and I think that we are at the question time.
Thank you so much, Allison. Excellent job. There was a lot to go over there. And I just wanted to piggyback on what you said about the letter of intent. Maggie McDonald has posted that in the chat box, the link, but you can also easily find it on our website. It's really short, easy to fill out, and we encourage you to do that as soon as possible. Okay, time for questions. And do we have, V, are there any in the chat room?
There aren't any that haven't been answered already.
I saw a couple. So we'll, I see a lot of raising of hands if Maggie wants to call on them.
Yeah, it looks like we do have a hand up from Amy Smith. So Amy, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, you can go ahead and do that now.
Okay, in the document, there's a difference in a couple of the dates. On the action item list, it says January 15th for the intent to apply paper, but then when you read through it, in the list, it says the one-page intent to apply must be December 31st. So I was just curious as to which date it is.
It's January 15th.
Okay, thank you.
With apologies, it's January 15th.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. We'll definitely revise that. What other questions do we have?
I don't see any other hands up, so please raise your hand or just at this point jump in if you have a question or drop it in the chat.
And I will say to the woman who just asked a question about the letter of intent, I think, once those letter of intents are collected, we may be reaching out to you about your proposal. And so that's why it's important that we have about a 6-week period there that we can, again, help you out, assist you, support the work.
While we're waiting, I know people are going to think of questions. Maggie, could you talk about, Maggie McDonald, talk about where the PEC website and where all this is found and how they email us if they want to do a one-to-one technical assistance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you all would like to do one-to-one technical assistance session, I'm actually going to go ahead and drop my email in the chat after this, and you can just get in touch with me directly. Or you can request assistance right through the intent to apply form. There's a little checkbox that says, like, I would like additional assistance with this project, and you can either check it for yes or check no and go ahead and just go on your own. But you can ask for assistance either way. And the intent to apply form is really simple. It's not something super in-depth, and you definitely don't have to do exactly what you say you're gonna do in that form, especially if you talk with us about some different ideas and come up with something a little bit different than what you originally said you were going to do in the intent to apply. So that just encouraging you to fill that out early or get in touch with us as soon as possible if you have an idea, because we're really excited to work that idea out with you or help you massage it into something final.
And Maggie, I think that's great you pointed out that we won't hold people's feet to the fire with the exact thing they put in the letter of intent. You know, it's just to give us an idea. So that's important. V, I think I do see some questions.
Yeah, so the first question is, can a county submit more than one application if they have several ideas? And then related to that is the second question, which is, can the project or idea cover more than one county?
Jim, do you like that?
Would like me to take that? I would say yes to both. You know, we're interested in the idea that sort of laser targeting on a particular gap in the overall student progression. So if there's an inspired school district that has identified more than one gap and they want to test those ideas, I'm all for it. Remember, this is a demonstration of new ideas or transfer of existing good ideas to high need areas that we can ultimately take to policymakers and say, this demonstration has shown that we can close the gap and you all need to scale these ideas. So this is more about demonstrating a response to a targeted need. So I would welcome all the creativity you have.
Thank you, Jim. V, I see more questions.
Yeah. Okay, so the third question is about appendix items in the RFP. There isn't mention of additional items that are needed to be attached in the application. Are items needed such as LOAs, organization signature pages, and so on?
Allison, would you like to?
Yes. So I believe that I just actually walked through the draft of the submission form this morning or late last night. And so those items are attachments in that electronic submission. And I think I could just say this, and Maggie, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the form that you will fill out has a whole bunch of, it's a fillable form, right? It's a Qualtrics form. And then there's a place that you will attach your actual narrative. Your actual narrative can be 20 pages long, Word document, PDF, whatever. And that's what you'll put up there. And then you'll see all these different places for uploads. And I know when I was practicing, I was just uploading random things, but there were, that's where you'll be uploading that letter of intent. So that letter, that I think you called it an LOA, letter of acceptance, achievement, something. Yeah, there's a place for that will be posted. I should also say, and I don't know, the same thing with the budget. The budget form is something that you will upload, and the budget narrative is something that you will also upload.
Maggie McDonald, anything to add to that?
That's Allison's correct on all counts there, but we will have we'll have a budget form, and a budget justification form posted on our website that y'all can just go fill out, and then you'll upload it through that form. just so you don't have to all come up with your own budgets to make it less confusing. And then we will also provide you with headings for the 20-page narrative document that we would like you to use, and then you'll upload that through our application form as well. And then you have to include a signature from, I think, the directors of your organizations if you're collaborating, or just the director if it's just one org, and you can attach that as well. So we'll be providing all those documents for you, and we'll make sure that you know where to find them when we upload that application form.
Hey,
I think going back to the dates, if I could just add, I'm looking very quickly to make sure that I give the right date. So these grants will be, the notification will be in the spring. So when we think about projects that may even start as early as summer of 2021, fall of 2021. So I think that that is an important consideration, that you will, from the time you submit to the time that you're notified is a very short period of time, which, as all of us who have submitted things that are under review, that seem to be under review forever, that short time period is a blessing.
a good point. V, I think we have another question.
Yes. So the question is about whether or not a cover page counts in the 20-page limit for the narrative.
No.
So that does not.
No.
So I think one of the things that you'll notice, and for those on the call, that the narrative, the 20-page narrative is really specific. It asks very specific questions. There are very specific headings. If I were writing this up for a proposal, I would take those headings, I would take those questions and just make sure they're addressed exactly as is and fit that in 20 pages, and hopefully not have to resort to a 6 font, to get that in. But no, I'm kidding. I think it does say 10 or 12 font. But I think that if you look at the headings and you answer the questions, that's the narrative. So again, thinking about that idea that you have in your head, go look at those questions now and say, how would I start sketching this out? How would I answer this? How does my project relate to that question or that heading? And then it'll start to come together.
Can I add something to this? Because the resource guide is very comprehensive and can be overwhelming. A lot of the questions have to do with technical requirements. I would just urge interested applicants to make maximum use of individual consultation on this, because it'll be much easier to flesh out the construction of the letter, the proposal, the design, when you can work with an individual. The reason that PAC is sort of coordinating this whole process, as well as convening the committee that will review the letters and ultimately the proposals, is that it's a consortium of educational experts, P12, higher ed, community-based business. So there are a lot of experts in very specific fields, whether it's evaluation, early childhood, etc. They will match you. PEC will match you with a consultant to help you flesh out your proposal. We don't want the resource documents or the technical requirements to be barriers. So as Allison said earlier, we are not the government. No disrespect to the state. We are not the federal government where we're going to dismiss a proposal because the staple was in the wrong place or the margins weren't in line. That's not our intent.
And I think, can I just add to that, Jim? Because I think what you are saying is absolutely true. And I think I speak for you. I hope maybe.
Always do, please.
Say those resources, particularly like the national studies that are all linked there. There's a section where we say, why is this project, how is this aligned to what we know works? What we don't want is you to feel like you've got to go in and forge through all those documents and write a term paper in the middle of your proposal. But the resources that are quite good, but that is not the purpose. I mean, it is not, because somebody asked me this in an email outside of this phone call. So we have to write a lit review? No, we don't have to write a lit review. But those resources are there to help you. You don't need to restate what the resources already say, But in a sentence or two, if you could really align your idea with what a evidence-based practice is, that's what you need to do. And I hope it's okay to say that, but it's not a literature review. But that literature that's there is really good.
I'm glad.
The literature review was done for you.
That's what I was just going to say. Somebody that I used to teach with was telling me, wow, I think the application's so straightforward and I love it, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to fill out in the resource guide. I'm like, no, you don't have to fill out anything. It is what it says. It's a resource guide to prevent you from having to do research if you want to cite that or give you ideas. So very good at that. Okay, I know, V, we have more questions.
Yes. Okay. So if you're considering an extended year program, could it be applied for the summer of 2022?
Yes. Here's what I would suggest. And this is a little bit of a moving target. The Benedum Foundation, after the proposals are reviewed by the committee that PEC will be convening, will be making its awards in the spring of 2021. I would hope that the timeline of the proposal would be based on what you think design, and then we'll work backwards to see how the money is allocated and the time frame for it to be used. What I don't want is any artificially constrained timeline. If you said, I have an idea, but it really needs to span summer of 21 and summer of 22. And if that's what you need to find the growth that Allison is talking about, please put it in. I want form to follow function this time. Every time. So please put in what you think makes sense. If you said, look, I have an early childhood program, and I know because of COVID, there is a huge and widening gap in vocabulary among 3-year-olds between wealthy and low-income families. And I think I can raise the vocabulary level for those students who are left behind. But if you need 2 summers to track those kids and report back to us that I raised that vocabulary level for the kids who were really left behind, I want to see that idea proven. I don't care about the timeline. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Jim. That does.
And a word on COVID, because I don't know how we can not mention it. I started out by saying we want to look at disparities, because there are some really high-performing student populations in West Virginia, but there are gaps, and COVID is just going to accelerate and accentuate those gaps. More early learners that have struggled without the resources of other communities are going to be even more left behind, whether it's broadband access, whether it's family literacy skills, regardless. So I think this idea of closing gaps between high performers, low performers, wealthy districts and school communities, and low income, it's only going to be worse. I mean, everybody in the country is talking about it, and we cannot have a 2-tiered system.
Thank you, Jim. I think, V, there's one more. The person had to leave.
Yeah.
But I think it would be beneficial for everybody to hear it.
If groups are collaborating together, we'll both need to submit the letter of intent.
Is that a question? If it's a single project that's being implemented by 2 parties, 2 organizations, that's one proposal, one letter.
One letter. Okay, good. And we'll answer that, Maggie, and then we'll go ahead and when we send out, our thank you note to everybody and different links, we can send this chat box.
And if I could just add, I think for the one-on-one technical assistance, even if your idea right now is, you could fit on a sticky note, right? Because it's just the idea. and you could flesh it out with a couple arms. You don't have to wait until you have a full proposal developed to ask for technical assistance.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Um,
ask now.
Yeah, ask now, because
Ask-
that would.
Yeah, literally right now. Who has a question for PA about their project?
Yeah.
And let me just add one other thing, just to stimulate thinking. When I mentioned earlier that we convened frontline practitioners to inform this RFP, it's because we really want to tap the ideas of frontline folks who have said, you know, I've always wanted to try something. I've always thought about this. I've always wanted to, and if I only had a shot. That's the creativity we want to tap with this RFP. This is not an academic exercise. All due respect, Professor Dagin. This is about looking at what practitioners are experiencing and being able to put some flesh around it. So that was done quite intentionally. That we wanted, real practitioners to tell us what's important and what to look for. And I want to tap that in these proposals as well. And such things as collaboration, I wanted to mention that because Allie mentioned it earlier. Make sure it's purposeful. Collaboration for its own sake is not meaningful. If it serves a purpose, great. But as a foundation, I'm always hearing about foundations want to see collaboration. So let's collaborate. To do what? To impress you, the funder. But there should be other purposes. So make sure if you want to work across organizations, please do so, but make sure there's a designed purpose for that. I mentioned earlier that we have such a wide range of performance in West Virginia. Use the maps. Figure out who's doing something well. It can be new and improved, or it doesn't have to be imported from Boston. Let's be very clear. If you are submitting a proposal to say, look, XYZ has this instructional leadership model. They're as poor as we are, they're as isolated as we are, and those kids are off the chart. We want to adopt it, and here's what our plan is for adopting it in our community. I say great, because there's good work going on in West Virginia. There's great work. We want to shine a light on it, and we want to make sure it's connected to where that work needs to be done.
Thank you, Jim. Well said. One more question, V, I think.
If a county school system applies, could county money be considered matching?
Yes. In fact, I look favorably on that as a foundation because it shows the commitment of the institution.
Absolutely. Any other questions? I know we're running just a tad over, but. Well,
I thought we were on till noon. Anybody want to pitch an idea while we have time?
Yeah, that's great.
It's like clinical rounds in a hospital. Say, look, I've got a problem. Let us, sometimes it stimulates thinking.
Yeah. There's a question. Who do we contact for technical assistance? And I think, Maggie, you put your email address in there. Do you also want to put all of ours too, like you did last time?
Yep, I can do that now, and I will also be sharing those in an email after this session if you want to individually reach out to any of us who have talked today.
That's great. Well, I was going to wrap it up with support for applicants, but I think we've all touched on that. It's absolutely, we're interested and excited to help you one-on-one or in any way you need. So Maggie's putting the information in there now, and we're looking forward to your excellent applications, and we're helping you make them excellent, whichever you need. So thank you very much for each of you joining and hanging in there with us. And we will be right here. Contact us if you need anything at all. Anybody else add.
Anybody want to pitch an idea? We can have clinical rounds. There's 150 critical friends.
It would be good. You know, Jim, sometimes we educators like to keep our good ideas to ourselves. We're
Okay.
kind of territorial that way.
I'm just kidding. I'm just saying we have the time.
Oh, we really have some nice comments in the chat box about the
Okay.
excellent opportunity, and thank you for the one-on-one. So everybody have a great week, and we thank you once again and look forward to your application. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
down $137 today.